Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month we're revisiting and actually wrapping up a theme that we did a year ago. The idea of environment can play a bigger role in someone's overall stability. Boundaries can be one piece of that pie. There's a Cypriot proverb that says, when your garden is dry, don't pour water in other gardens. A lot of times we sometimes forget about that we need to take care of ourselves. Revive Ministries does not proselytize, but it just reminds me as a Christian and the story of Jacob and Esau. He's running away just to give you a little gist of the story. Later on, when he's fleeing his brother because he stole his birthright, he actually ends up in a place where he slept, and they called Bethel, and it was just a rock in the middle of nowhere, and that for him was safety. That was his home at that point. And I felt, sometimes when we think about our home or what our environment when it's safe, it doesn't always have walls. Sometimes it is much more deeper than that. I just want to also mention today we have returning guests. Thank you, the therapy twins coming back again. Joan and Jane, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your
Hello. Insight. Thank you for having us again, Robert. We appreciate it.
I was looking back, and last time our episode posted was October 13th. We did October. It's okay to fall. 2022 is when the last time you were here. Thank you again for coming on. I just want to give a little disclaimer before we begin. If you are in crisis, please seek professional help in the United States. 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline may be one tool, but I don't like reinventing the wheel. So whatever works, whatever groups, whatever communities that you feel safe to ask those 3 words, I need help. I need help. That's basically where it comes. I'm going to start with a quote and then we'll get started. It's from George Moore. He says, "A man travels the world over in search of what he needs and returns home to find it." What comes to mind when you hear this? Right now, it's the holidays. Doesn't always mean it's the most happiest time. Sometimes there's empty chairs in the sense that, there's less people no longer there. This can be very hard for some. Any thoughts when you hear this quote?
Any thoughts when you hear that quote, Jane?
I have, yeah, sure I do. I want to go back to, Joan and I live in Florida. I think a year ago we had just moved practically, and I'm a single mom, and my adult son is in Connecticut. So when I was down here and I couldn't make it home for some of the holidays, I felt extremely alone, even though my identical twin sister was sitting next to me. And I realized that what I've been thinking about lately is what you were kind of saying with that story. Home can often shed the walls and be a state of mind. And I saw myself kind of sinking in like a depression. And when I am depressed, like a lot of human animals, or anxious or whatever, when we're not in balance, our thought process is also not in balance.
Yeah.
And I found myself with these old, distorted, poor me, what about me? Who do you think you are not calling me? All kinds of things. Even my ex-husband, I was thinking these strange thoughts. And I'm so much older than I used to be, so I don't like to, I think therapy is a great thing. I've had it. Mm-hmm. I like to quickly vent and kind of turn it around. And I find the best way for me to turn it around, the quickest, is to say the one prayer that I know the best in my life. And once I say that prayer, it happens to be the Lord's Prayer, I always feel better, and I feel like I'm on autopilot. So I'm not sure how I'm always feeling better when I say it. I think it's just positive words coming out of my mouth, maybe, or gratefulness, thankfulness. I don't know.
And I find me.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, just for me, more simply, because I'm actually single and I have no children. And what I find for me is reaching out to other people that I often have on my mind, but maybe I haven't seen them in a long time. And I either send a picture of flowers or I'm checking on you. And I find that so many people then return that to me, and it's comforting.
Yeah, a lot of times, at least from personal and also working in the field, is personalize the context, so whatever works for you. So what I'm trying to say is, a lot of times in mental health, we generalize too much. Generalize, I'm depressed, oh, this is how it is, or I'm feeling sad, this is how. But you have so much context of who you are and what makes you feel better. A lot of times, like for me, a lot of times if I feel like I'm maybe growing to have a panic attack, I do certain breathing techniques, progressive relaxation, mindfulness,
right,
kind of things. I do EFT. I even do EFT sometimes, just tapping solution. I do all these things, and people are like, oh, that's a lot. Well, no, that's what I need to do. This is what I know. If I feel that this is going to be coming about family, and let's be honest, sometimes facing family can be anxious. There's a lot of anxiety in that. So for me, I think when we remember, at least for me, when I look at this and think about the idea of home and environment, I have to be individual to myself, to what context is really directed to myself in that regard. Any other comments? Or
I do, because it's actually, this is not going to sound great, because it's actually done in a prison. When somebody takes a life, say, I think it was England, they had to actually, their prison sentence was to give life, which for them was plants. And I noticed, for me, I always have to have plants around or I'm not very comfortable. And when they're not doing well, I prune them and I help them and I take care of them. And it always, always makes me feel better. It really does. Helping another person was proven, so I'm going to include plants because I feel they're sentient beings, but helping something else always, always helps you. It always does. So even if you're suicidal, if you go and help somebody replant something, for some reason, those thoughts will go away. We are pack animals. We are meant to help each other.
And to comment on one of the things you said when you were saying, when I'm anxious or near panic, I do A, B, C, and somebody said to you, that seems like a lot. And, if you wash your full body and hair and do a little extra grooming that a lot of us do, that's good.
That's a lot.
That takes, for some people, they could do it in 10 minutes, I guess, 30 minutes, an hour. But if you think about that, what about upstairs? So for me, because I tend to I go backwards into a sadness that I know where that's headed, to a depression, that I don't want that. So I'm ready to start my day now. So what's different from a year ago, I now start my day with, even if it's 3 minutes of something positive for my psyche. I've also included yoga because Bessel van der Kolk says
He wrote The Body Keeps the Score. It's about trauma.
The body, yes. And he talks about trauma yoga. It's a new style of yoga. Well, it's probably not new. Yoga is so not new. That helps people sometimes even more so than traditional therapy and meds. So I do start my day with some yoga stretching, or we do some qigong. So the self-care that most of us in these busy societies forget about. And I don't think I could have a peaceful home if I didn't address my body, mind, and spirit.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times it's, it's those self-talk, that talk you have inside yourself that really is sometimes the hardest. But also, if you're able to find ways, like you mentioned, or even I mentioned, it can make the situation that seems overwhelming less. Not to say it's easy. Not to say any of this is easy, but it's something that it starts from you. How do you feel? What works for you? And I feel a lot of times when sometimes we generalize it because we want some sort of certainty, like, because there's so much uncertainty. So like, I'm depressed, so this is how it is. But I feel it's a big misstep, at least from my experience, because you're not including yourself in it. You're not including your family background, your cultural background, your context, why this matters. What gets hard is when you start saying, I don't need help. When you stop asking those three questions, those three words, and then it becomes just, the negative self-talk, ruminating that's when it gets overwhelming. When you don't feel you can ask for anything, and you just say, oh, this is just how it is. And James Baldwin says it this way: perhaps home is not a place, but simply a irrevocable condition. It's kind of something that we work on, especially when we think of the concept of home. People have these huge houses and just feel empty. They could be around several thousands of people that say they care about you and feel like none of them are your friends. You just don't trust any of them. But you can have one person and you feel like you're connected. You feel present. Any thoughts when you hear this quote?
Well, being an identical twin, you often, especially if you're getting along, you have so many opportunities to not be reaching out for other human connections, because you've got this one right here. It's the same DNA, different fingerprints, I guess. But
the myth is, though, that you always have somebody. Like, people say you'll never get lonely. Of course you can.
Of course you can get lonely, because the funny thing is, science, they're always wondering nature versus nurture. There's that fight, right? Well, because it's both, almost always. We were subject to people wanting to do twin studies, etc. So life experience does change the expression. So Joan's a natural born comedian, and I occasionally do get a laugh.
Sometimes. But I can make myself laugh, and I wonder what other people do when they're alone. Well, I guess I don't wonder all the time, but say you're all by yourself, somehow in my brain I just rerun funny stories that I could have been a kid, and sometimes they made me cry back in the day, but boy, you rerun that as an adult, and people say, oh, you could never get a funny story out of that. Oh, you can. Because if you can't laugh at yourself, how are you going to get through life? I just read too that joy and love and that first feeling you have, and laughter, when you are attracted to something. Hey, it could be something too. It's an AI out there that you're attracted to. But when you have that feeling inside yourself, that's what fuels the world. And I believe, one of my exes is an addict, and he's in recovery. And it's every day I won't say that it's not a struggle for him, but boy, when he's laughing, it is just so much easier for him to then start his day. Oftentimes, that's the last thing he'll do, though. And he wonders why.
Well, speaking of addiction,
sad.
though, as a single mom, I managed to get myself addicted to cigarettes, and I managed to drink too much alcohol. I managed to gain some weight because I did quit smoking, and then I had 20 pounds to lose. And living with Joan, that's a lot of work to get up in the morning and to treat all of that, right? Well, and I had help, of course. So living with Joan, late at night, I would hear her, and it's just the two of us. I would hear this laughter coming out of her bedroom. And remember, now what I'm doing is I'm visualizing the life that I would like to have. I'm going over who do I need to forgive. I'm going over, all this stuff, and it's all so important. And yet I hear all this laughing that seemed a little bit easier. So I have truly incorporated a lot of laughter, especially at the expense of myself. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's a helpful way. We grew up with a father who found humor in all crises. Everything that happened to him, kind of like that movie. Joan saw this movie, a terrific movie. It won best foreign film one year, and I think it's called Beautiful. A Beautiful Life or something like that.
No, I think it might just be Beautiful. It's Italian, and they're in a concentration camp, and there's a child. So the father turned it into a game, and it actually worked
to help this child cope. It was amazing. So, we all know these things. Laughter is the best medicine. So I've incorporated laughter, and I have to say it is super helpful.
You cannot feel physical pain. And I learned this from a surgeon, because he had to take my toenail off, and that wasn't going to go well with me. And there was no pain medicine involved. And I thought, this is just torture. Why would you do this? It looked like a pliers. Like, isn't there a machine? What's going on? So he told me a joke. I burst out laughing. He yanked the toenail off. I got mad at him, but I realized I didn't feel it. And he said, when you're laughing, you don't feel it. So, of course, I wanted to go into emotional pain on our own, and we researched it a lot. You can't feel emotional pain either while you're belly laughing.
Oh, well, I'm just
going to, you're done.
Listen, I'm going to tell you that's true, because when I would be laughing, none of those, let's call them poor me thoughts, the negative self-talk that I'm fighting so hard, which when you're fighting it, you've lost. You know what I mean? It's you've lost the battle. And that's where I had to drop to my knees and start praying. I really did. And it's helpful, no matter which way you could get it, a self-help book all the way to whichever Bible, Quran. I, of course, don't know a lot of the Torah, anything to go on the positive, grateful, loving side.
And in order to really get help, I noticed you can't do it alone. So if you had a buddy, I use Jane, and what will happen is, say I'm getting really negative, she'll say, "Excuse me, what did you mean to say?" Or what we really liked now is we start singing, and we'll just say, "Hello, darkness, my old friend." And it reminds the other person, why are you going so dark? Life is precious, and it's short. And our parents are gone, and other people are gone, and it's the holidays. So do you want to spend it crying and, like me, screaming? Jane crying, me screaming? Or do you want to spend it with flowers and friends and happy things? Not happy, peaceful is what I should say.
I find that peace for me happens when I am less and less opinionated, or I have fewer expectations. Then things seem to go much better.
Yeah. I feel for, a lot of what, when it comes to, I work with sometimes some of the populations that all they're thinking about is being better, progressing. I'm like, what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun? Because we are human beings, and we're both exceptional and unimpressive at the same time, a lot of the times. So, like, not taking yourself so seriously. It will take the time it takes. Like, I remember the quote before I said in the monologue, it was from a Cypriot Proverb: when your garden's dry, don't pour water in other gardens. Take time, be kinder to yourself. Don't just be nice to navigate the social norms that we don't understand normally, because we're in different environments all the time. People come from different contexts. Be kinder to yourself and to others. Things, unfortunately, I feel that we get stuck on this enoughness. I read a book on that, like this. I need to be busy. There was a time when I would say, "How are you, Jane? How are you, Joan?" And they'll be like, "I am okay." Now it's, "Oh, I'm so busy." Well, okay. What does that actually mean? Well, do you have so for me is any self-care is better than no self-care. So whatever that looks like, it's not a race. You find out, I do find humor very insightful because it does kind of present things so close to the line of truth. You know what I mean? That we can kind of laugh about it. You know,
Yeah.
And at least for me, while you were talking, you kind of answering this question, like what has been helped you both build a positive home, and you just gave a lot of examples. But I want to ask you the second part: what have you seen not help you guys when it comes to?
What doesn't help is being unforgiving. If you are an unforgiving person, it tends to like just boomerang back to you. And what I noticed were clients that weren't moving forward as quickly as some of the others. There was a lot of unforgiveness, and I get it. Who's going to forgive, child abuse to the point where now you don't even have a home? And I'll just share. I got some gasps over this, but I was raped, and I said on one of the podcasts that I know that person didn't grow up saying, I can't wait to rape somebody. I feel that you can let go and forgive because you experienced that person in one of their worst moments of life. But there is a quote that I believe everyone should live by, and it's something to do with every human being is better or worth more than their worst act. We have all done things that we're not proud of, but I think with addiction, especially with opioid, but I'm going to say alcohol too, is what do I need to forget? That sounds like you're not going to forgive yourself. This is what, I'm sorry, we learned that in school, in college, is with heroin addiction. What is it that I need to forget? But I saw that with alcoholics too. And if somebody isn't able to at least speak of it briefly in therapy or to a mentor or somebody, and that other person say back to them that you're worth more than that, and I'm going to help you forgive yourself. Because I heard that God believes that if you stole a piece of paper or you stole millions of dollars from somebody, they view it as you still stole. So why are people being so hard on themselves? You can change, and you don't have to be that person.
I think we are, because it's what doesn't seem to work, to add to what Joan is saying, is for some reason, everybody who makes a mistake, an error, screws up and says the wrong thing or does the wrong thing, for some reason we're giving them a life sentence. People, you lose your job because you made an error when 30 years ago you were taught
5 errors and kept your job.
You might be taught how to do it. Discipline is teaching. And I think that if we follow the society we're living in now and bring that into our home, we will never have peace. And it's very, you have to sometimes be quiet. You don't have to, a comedian once said, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Sometimes if you don't choose happiness, you're going to program your psyche, your brain, like a computer, into the negative.
Yes.
So sometimes what doesn't help is too much speaking. Not the person you live with does not have to hear every single complaint you have. Some of that is behind their back to yourself, to your best friend, to your other sister, where you can all chuckle and say, you know what? Everybody has flaws, myself included.
And when you go to compare with like Mother Teresa, because we're not going to be able to be like her, you don't compare to another person. You actually are supposed to only compare yourself to yourself. And therefore, you don't get into any trouble of resentments or envy or whatever. What's the other word? Envious.
Envious and jealousy.
Jealous.
You know what's not helpful?
What?
I found the biggest thing for me, because when you're depressed, when you're anxious, when you're manic, when you're high from drugs, you're going to look through a particular lens, the drug lens, the depressed lens, etc. Well, is that the one you want to live in? Or did you want to change your lens to love, kindness, respect, compassion, all these good things, consideration? Because if I kept up all the wrongs, like telling people. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I don't even know where I was headed. I think it was a path to hell, which I view as metaphorically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's not very helpful either. So, and
Yeah.
pointing a finger, remember how many are pointing back at us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of like, especially when I'm in church setting and as a leader, one thing I was also taught was the way we see God is how we treat ourselves and others. So if we see God as being this, like he's, if you don't do this, you're
Yes.
you're gonna treat yourself and everyone else. And a lot of times there've been little studies about how, especially young kids going through church, the first person they see is their parents. So their parents will be kind of what they kind of mirror what God is supposed to be, supposedly. So I feel there's a lot of I think when I was young, I'm sure a lot of people could relate. Be nice. What does that even mean? Like, be nice. Like, a lot of times it's like kind of like, out of sight, out of mind. Just be nice. But I think, especially with forgiveness, there's people have done obviously horrible things. You're not forgiving the act. You're forgiving.
Right.
You're just forgiving so you could have a release from it. The fact of the matter is, working in the field I work in, I've noticed that I'm just amazed that people are still alive, still doing.
I know it. I know.
And for me, it's not a question of, oh, how could you do this? It's more of like I'm kind of inspired. They're still here. They're still doing every day. And for me, I feel if we're a little bit kinder, not only to ourselves but to those around us, we maybe find a little bit more forgiveness, because the idea is that life keeps moving on. Our friends and what we used to be struggling with, if we look back a little bit, why can't we be patient for them? They have the process and learn what they need to learn. If we're going to be like, oh, they got this wrong, that wrong, 5 things wrong, I'm like, well, at the same time, I was that person too, and I need giving them the time to understand it, because sometimes there's a lot of information. I think that's the biggest thing now. Like, you go on your phone, you can learn every single thing, everything that you look up, but you don't really get a lot of understanding of it and what it means to you today. So I appreciate all what you said. I want to ask you, give a moment, especially you're returning, any updates for those who are listening, anything about you, just give you an opportunity to share.
Well, there have been the updates are interesting, because we have been sought out by people doing film and documentaries.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been exciting, because the documentary was done by a visual anthropologist. And one funny thing, when Joan and I were in college together, we didn't like our majors at the time, but we loved our anthropology class.
And she's a mirror twin, and usually mirror twins are physical, like like if one has a mole here, the other one has a mole there. We did get moles removed, we can't even try. I try to think about that, but when we were talking about being mirror twins, we noticed that emotionally and psychologically we mirrored each other's things throughout life. And I had a very hard time with forgiveness, because what I used to say was, that's God's job. I didn't believe in a punishing God. So I had no problem forgiving myself. But the quote that a lot of people don't, this one helped a lot. It's called, I forget who said it. To forgive is to forgive is to free a prisoner and find out that prisoner was you. So I thought, wow, that's different. But I like the funny one. Marlena Dietrich, she said something like, once you have forgiven I could say partner, but I'm going to say man, because it was a quote. Once you've forgiven your man, you cannot heat his sins back up for breakfast. And we were on the radio and we said, really, we can reheat those sins. I was married at the time. I could reheat those sins for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a midnight snack. But yeah, forgiveness is key. let's get on it, everybody. Because remember, in nursing, if you make a nursing mistake, everybody looks at you like, oh my God, how could you do that? And you just look at the other nurses and just realize in your head, no one's perfect. I'll just wait for you to make that mistake. And I'm going to be nicer to you than you are to me. And he made the mistake. And then I was nice to him. And then he felt bad. He said, Joan, I'm so sorry I made you look like a jerk. Everybody makes a mistake. You're not human if you don't.
Yes. Yeah. Anything else you want to?
That cancel culture. I swear, you make a mistake and all of a sudden you have a death sentence. And you have to apologize to the entire world.
Yeah, there's one more thing about things that what would be helpful versus not helpful in my life, and of course it's in all those the elderly, our ancestors who say this is how you should do it or whatever, and we all think we're smarter and we're going to go differently. So when something happens to you, if you fight it, you are in such a more difficult, it's like now you're fighting a tsunami. But, you know, if you swim with the wave or with the current, and by changing your perception, making different choices, life is a little bit easier. Well, actually, it's been a lot easier for me going with the flow rather than trying to go against the wind. It's, you know, I'm right, you're wrong. That's going against the, you know, fighting for your job when you see that City Hall has a rule and you can't have it, or the public says you said something racist, now you can never work again. You know, it's just hard for
it is very hard. I remember this one French proverb says, and we're talking about Thanksgiving, you know, this time of year, it says that gratitude is the heart's memory. I thought that was really nice. You know, the way the French proverb is like, gratitude is a heart's memory. Sometimes we just want to remember things rationally and in a way that doesn't really make sense as us humans. We're very emotional people. Some may say I'm less so or more so, but we're not islands at the very least. And a lot of times how we address it, just like if you ignore having a cold or if you ignore having some sort of medical illness, it will start to build up. So a lot of times what doesn't happen a lot is just these conversations within yourself. Oh, I didn't feel good. This sucked. I didn't want to be in this crowd. Why does this crowd bother me so much? Why do what they say bother me? Oh, I said something rude. Oh, well, I misspoke. Like he said, this cancel culture is unrealistic. We all say these things a lot of the time, and there's not a lot of kindness or there's people disagree all the time, but now it's harder to do so. Winston Churchill's, and I feel like how we shape and how we navigate even the small conversations really dictate how we make the big conversation. Winston Churchill says we shape our homes and then our home shapes us. So if our home is going to be like, do this or else, you know, I should be somewhere else, and you're never really present where you're at, you know, and you're never really happy. You're on this tension, and then anyone gets in your way, oh God forbid someone gets in the way or something happens, because environmentally outside of your little bubble, we may take those things super personal, but they usually have nothing to do with you. Get in a car accident by accident, you're just driving to work, get in a car accident, car breaks down. Does that mean that someone is out to get you? Probably not. It just happens, unfortunately. But like I was mentioning, everyone hears only what he understands. So if we only understand bitterness, if we only understand how we are against to ourselves, we're going to be that way to others. If, like I mentioned before, if God is a distant God, then everyone's going to be distant. You're going to treat everything kind of distant. If God is going to be someone vengeful, he's going to be vengeful, and you're going to be vengeful to yourself and those others around you. It's kind of really important to kind of see how you treat yourself, because it will sometimes reflect how you treat others.
And you know, you're right. What you want in life, you are supposed to emulate. So if I want more, you know, I had all these I had a lot of, I've had, let's say maybe, well, I've had 3 long-term relationships. Let's go with that.
Mm-hmm.
And they got that. So it started out, let's give it a C. Then I had a B, and then I actually had what I thought was an A plus. But what I learned about myself was they were great. It got better and better and better because I was willing to do some work on myself. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I started to learn about myself was I didn't give back this way, or if I want love, I have to be more loving. If I want respect, I have to be more respectful. So in my home, whatever I think is a home, and I'm the one that mentioned it's like a state of mind, because if my home is being viewed through depression or trauma glasses, it's not very, it's actually
Not very loving or peaceful.
It's very scary almost. So, if somebody was so concrete that they say, what would you like your home to be? I always, no matter what home I ever had, and I was depressed for probably too long, I always had one corner of every room pleasing to my eye, because it was the start, so my eye could catch it once in a while. That was helpful.
But unfortunately with trauma, we can brilliantly isolate ourselves because then it becomes safer, and I'm not going to start screaming or say anything inappropriate or try to commit suicide. I'm going to stay by myself, and this way here I can live. That can be dangerous too, because again, we're like dogs. We're not isolative animals. We need each other. So therefore, you might have to go to the store by yourself, and you have to go to the movies by yourself, and you have to go out to eat by yourself, because it comes back to you. I used to do that. I used to, and I always cooked dinner for myself. Never. Some of my clients would say, why? I don't cook. I don't do anything because it's only me. Oh my goodness. What are you giving out? That you don't even eat a terrific meal? So again, you have to treat yourself really well, and then when somebody comes into your life, it's so much nicer. Or if not, it's okay too.
I had a former client, thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
And people can get very creative, and I think it's a brilliant thing. I love when people are so creative, because then I get more creative.
Yeah.
But what she did was she always set the table for 2, even though she lived alone.
Yeah.
And she always made sure she had, her bed had the 2 nightstand, everything, and wherever she would go, she would socialize, whether it was the post office or whatever. She was very lonely, and that would bring back more positive to her, and she was able to eventually improve her life.
Somebody just asked me, because I'm starting a new relationship and it's exciting. And what did I do? They said, what was it that you did for the last few months? And I thought to myself, I didn't love the exact traditional Our Father. I mean, I liked it, but I read a scholar said that if you don't really understand it, you could actually, in your mind, because believe me, I'm negative, you could be praying for war. And I thought, oh God, Joan, you are so vengeful and warring. There's all kinds of wars going on in there. So I looked at a few other things about prayers, and I found one of the original Aramaic translations of the Lord's Prayer, and I really loved it. So I started saying that, but also what I added was every plant, insect, whatever you are, a human being, an animal, an insect, a bird, whatever you are, if you're able to experience love, I used to say this at night for about 3 months. I want all of you, because I have experienced true love. I want everyone to experience what I have experienced. Boy, did that jumpstart. I've known the person for a year already. By saying those things, praying for everyone to have the love that I have felt in my life, really jump-started the happiness in my life. I just wanted to say that.
And isn't that wonderful? Because the Lord's Prayer, the one that I know from church, that I don't have, I guess, some of those thoughts, but it was positive, and I never could understand why, when I was at my lowest, simply reciting a prayer lifted me.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
I think outward centeredness is very, when you get out of yourself, it's not traditionally done like you mentioned before. You feel better when you help someone. You feel better when you're doing something for someone, it's important to continue to do self-care. You don't want to just do things for others and forget yourself. But however, there's something to it that is centering, because we are social beings. I think a lot of times, with industrial revolution, with the cities crowding, people were so close but not connected, more and more and more and more and more.
Right.
And now we have a kind of a crisis in the way of how we communicate, or how we don't. At the very least, we don't really communicate well. And sometimes, the small conversations are so important. So, like, whether it's a friend, a relationship, whatever, if you're like thinking to yourself, well, yeah, she or he, that kind of bothered me. Well, talk to the person.
Yeah.
Talk to them.
Yeah.
Don't let it slide. Not because, well, it's not a big deal. Well, it's a big enough deal that it bothers you. And it's not that you want to like nitpick or anything. It's the transparency and working through the communication barrier that a lot of us do. Because the fact of the matter is, we always think do it dualistically. There's only this or that. How about a third option? How about a third option? Is there a third option where, hey, I didn't really like that. Let's talk about it. Oh, this person doesn't. Like, sometimes we are either too hard on ourselves or the other person to understand something that, if you're really honest, you have your own context, your own background, your own situation. It's kind of unfair to kind of assume that the person will automatically understand what or how to say things. But at the same time, it's giving yourself that grace to kind of be upset. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry, because that shows that something needs to change. So those kind of things together, I feel, at least for me, has helped my understanding and being able to not say things first. I remember you guys say comedy. One person said, and it's kind of funny. He's like, how has he been married? The wife was very kind of nagging. How have you been married for 50 years? He says, I say the third thing on my mind. I laugh. He said the first thing, divorce. Second thing, couch.
That's too funny.
Third thing, marriage.
So, I went to a winery once, and the gentleman, and I don't like a rosé wine. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, because I was going to pass, he said, no, you take 3 sips of a wine before. And this is the same thing. We have a great nephew, and he had to go to
food tasting,
like food school, if you could believe this is starting. I hope it's going to be good for him. But anyway, encouraging, taste this item 3 times before you say no. So, because, when you're so stuck in this is the way I behave, I don't allow this and this.
And this is how we've always done it.
This is how we've always done it. Well, now no one's learning anything. And one of the reasons we have children, one of the positives of children is to bring back a new perspective, a different way of seeing things. I mean, they're the ones that show you the joy of stepping in a puddle, things like that we've lost. But, so a changing perceptions and cutting people a little slack and finding out how they saw it years ago or whatever.
And I think sometimes it's also like things are going to be difficult, so sometimes we kind of like stuck in our ways. But the other thing is things are going to be difficult, so some things you may initially be like, that's not what I want to do, and then you'll be pleasantly surprised that you're like, this is actually pretty good. So if I just wanted to start preparing to run for, let's say, 10K or 5K or get up there, I know it's going to suck. I know I'm going to be out there running and it's going to hurt. Mm-hmm. But like to assume that these changes won't be a little bit discomforting, I think sometimes it's the illusion that may be a barrier. So sometimes that three tries thing maybe actually have some merit, because if we initially just going to be scattering away from anything that's difficult, then what are we actually learning? What are we actually growing? Because if it's not something you like after 3 times, just don't do it. But it's not gonna harm you per se. It may be discomforting, but how many conversations are discomforting? How many conversations do we try to steer away from? And like, if the person matters, sometimes it's gonna be discomforting. Sometimes it'll be, do I have to explain this, and you might be very familiar of what you think the person should know, but taking that extra time because there is a more value, intrinsic value in that relationship per se.
Don't know what shoes we never stepped in their shoes. You could think that somebody is giving you such bad road rage and they are up your bumper and they're beeping the horn, and you know what I say is move over as quickly as you can. That person could have a dog or a cat or a person in the car that needs to be at the hospital, but they didn't have time to call 911 or whatever. Just, you never know what another human being is going through. So even when somebody's mean or nasty, you could still try to be nice because that person is hurting. Jane always says, hurt people hurt people.
Well, when you become a nurse, I mean, I don't know if they still teach such things, but I became a nurse knowing that nurses and doctors were the worst patients. So my first year out, I had a doctor, and he was an elderly man. He was retired, but he was a doctor so-and-so, and he was a patient. And my goodness, this yelling and irritability, but I was used to that because we had an ornery father and some relatives that were a little rough. And I knew, here's the statement, kill them with kindness. I mean, we don't do such things anymore. He was a frightened person on the other side of medicine. He was in the bed and he was helpless. It was kill him with kindness.
Because in medicine you find a lot of people
irritable.
Yes, because they're frightened. That's a good point.
And it works.
And I want to say with addiction, a lot of times we give ourselves these unattainable goals, and then therefore now we failed and we're just so hard on ourselves. So I would say baby steps. When you're learning a musical instrument, you don't go and play the whole symphony. You learn baby steps, musical notes, whatever the clef thing was. I had a hard time with music, but
Hey,
you
Christmas,
go slowly.
Christmas and Hanukkah are coming. I'm sure there's other holidays that are coming. And there was a pastor, I used to go to a particular church, and Pastor Jim said, you don't go into war without your armor on. Why would you go out in the world without your spiritual armor on? And he literally it was the coolest thing. I would love it. He had the armor from the olden days, the sword archery with the thing, the
netting, steel.
It wasn't even,
netting.
It was more of a steel thing. It was probably the real olden days. But it's true, I get up in the morning, washing, brushing my teeth, drinking water, getting breakfast. It is as important as it was. But what's now more important, as important that I've added to that is, like I said, I have my meditation or prayer. I have my yoga. I do all kinds of things for my head because I'm so tired of blaming others when I know it's all been me, Dorothy. I saw it.
All been us.
I saw it, Dorothy and the Tin Man and everyone. I saw it.
It was our
I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
Didn't surrender emotional state.
Yeah, and the small steps, like you said, baby steps, but also I think we're this month finding building a home. A lot of times homes can be a scary place to remember, especially if we kind of in that. And what I would say to those listening, if you are in need of help, obviously your environment that may not be where you want to be. Maybe it's not as positive, but be around people that you can ask those 3 words, because a lot of times when it's that critical, that stressful, that overwhelming, we think irrationally and may find some really permanent solutions to something that's not permanent. We think about, you mentioned the person in the movie Beautiful. I didn't look it up, but I remember just reading Viktor Frankl and just his take on how it's not the optimist who actually survived. It wasn't the pessimist. It was the person who just dealt with what he could control, whatever that was. So if it's just 1 hour, if it's today is just getting up and going for a walk, if that's your success, then that's your success. And I feel in regards to also just the theme and the idea of understanding and being kinder to yourself, and taking the time. Last thing I want to say and ask your final thoughts. Basketball players, let's say a person who's coming to high school want to become a professional basketball player. If their whole focus is just to win an NBA championship, they're gonna. The thing is, they could be very disappointed. A lot of times, they could be very stressed. It's when you actually start embracing the grind, when you go to practice and you enjoy it, you understand your weak points, you just grind. That's when actually I feel that the building becomes, because a lot of times the fear is if you only think about the NBA championship, then you may resent actually basketball, which you loved in the very beginning,
Right.
whatever sport it was. So when you were like, some days were just maybe I'm really bad at this portion of the game, and that's all you work on. So I feel using that illustration, whether it's basketball, football, just learn to grind on what you're at. Be like Martin Luther King Jr. Be the best sweeper. If you're the sweeper, be the best sweeper in town. That's it.
Actually, that's wonderful.
Barbara Walters is dead, but I remember seeing an interview with her when she was very young, and of course there were no women in the newsroom at all, and she didn't like that. And her father or grandfather said to her, "You get a job. I don't care if you're going to be emptying the trash. You make sure you empty the trash like no one else has." I don't think that's how she started, but there's a lot of ways to get started. And I think that what people forget is when you're on an airplane and you're traveling with somebody young and the oxygen masks happen to come down, they direct you to put that on yourself first. Do not help anyone else until you have been helped. And that is a lesson I think of every day. I need to nourish myself as well as emotionally. So don't watch the news all day and get mad. Put something else on that actually is peaceful. That's my whatever advice.
Anything else? Anything you want to share?
Hey, just to go back to, I was a single mom. Somebody told me because I wanted to be a good mother, and I was really depressed at the time. So I was afraid that I wouldn't be a good enough mother. And someone said, "Jane, a happy mother's a good mother." And so I was on my quest for happiness, and I finally got there. Is all I want to say. Be kind to yourself.
Yes.
Baby steps. Boy, do they add up.
Yes, and I think just be kind to yourself, and just everything we mentioned here. It's just wonderful talking with you guys again, sharing your insight, being part of the conversation. A lot of times Rome wasn't built in one day.
No.
So a lot of these things, those listening, some of it may be helpful, some of it may not be as helpful, but find you. Be intentional about what helps you. Don't personalize everything that happens outside, because chances are has nothing to do with you. It just happens. Life happens. You walk out the door. Weather could be bad. You could get laid off. Sector of work. Things have changed in the workforce. Things happen. But I would just encourage you to find at least I don't like reinventing the wheel, but start intentionally finding what resources are there. Find a group. Do something. Maybe you're a little uncomfortable. It's okay.
Hey, be a regular somewhere. If you're super lonely and you don't want to find a group, go to a diner, go to a coffee shop, a bookstore. Be a regular.
Because now people actually say, "Oh my God, hi, twins. How are you? It's so nice to see you again." We don't know them, but we came to a state and we didn't know anybody. So Florida's an easier state to get to. People are very friendly here, where we are anyway. But that could have been that we were putting out friendly thoughts and interactions, and it came back to us. I believe in that.
Yeah, I think
home is where the heart is. That's what I think the whole thing is.
And if you don't like what your mind is saying, ask that heart. That heart has beautiful answers. Ask him or her.
I want to say thank you so much for coming on. And
Thank you.
I just want to say to those who are listening, watching, remember to stay updated with Revive Ministries' various platforms. Uh, all the links and everything about twins will be in the notes below. So find out more what they're doing and everything that they're. And I just want to share also, just be kinder to yourself. You know, this Rome was, like I said, little steps. Start with the small conversations, then you can get to the bigger conversations. And also, um, I just want to say happy holidays to everyone. We're starting to get into that. And if you're in line in the drive-through or at a restaurant, be kinder to those people. You don't know
Yes.
what they're going through. If they
Right.
get their order wrong, it's not going to be the end of the world. Just be kinder. Let's start. It starts from each one of us. So I just want to say that. This is Goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving with the last quote from Martin Luther King. He says, "I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too great of a burden to bear."
Ooh, wow.
Oh, I like that
Wow.
one. That's my new mantra.
Thank you.
No problem.